Welcome to the Corporate Law Lab podcast. I'm Neil Taylor, Director of the Corporate Law Center at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. Our guest today is George Ssamula, who joined us from his office in Kampala, Uganda. I got to know George during my time working in the African telecom infrastructure industry. He impressed me then with his intelligence, ability, and demeanor. Promoting George to a role of greater responsibility was one of the easier decisions I've made. First-year law student Omar Musaitif helped me co-host the episode. Our wide-ranging conversation explored everything from adjusting to the weather in England to managing teams of non-lawyers, and George's journey from expat law student in the UK and Germany, navigating the complexities of doing deals in Africa, to co-founding a telecom infrastructure company in Uganda. It was great to catch up with George, a super lawyer and all-around nice guy. So let's just start with your background, George. You're talking to us today from Kampala, Uganda. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Talking from Kampala, Uganda, East Africa.
And that's where you're from.
Yes, I'm from. I was born and bred in Kampala, and I had my earlier part of my education until what would be my college education was all in Uganda, and I had my university in the UK and my master's in Europe as well. And
Okay.
ended up working a bit all over the place, but Uganda is home.
Okay. So law school for you, because you went to undergrad university in the UK,
Yeah.
um, a law degree is an undergraduate degree in the UK, correct?
Yeah, it is an undergraduate
Right.
degree in the UK. Three for
Okay.
3 years, 3-year degree. Yeah.
Okay. And you went to Warwick, is that correct?
Yes, did my law degree at University of Warwick. It was an amazing experience and very good campus university, and learned quite a lot from there. So quite good.
So, what was it like being a Ugandan expat in Warwick? It's Warwick's in the central part of England, correct?
Yeah, it's in central part of England, around near in the Midlands. It was, of course, quite intimidating for the start, but the universities, as most, I'm sure yours as well, they have all these great programs that they help the foreign students to help acclimatize, have the the initial weeks where they show you, you get a buddy, you get a mentor, and those two really do help quite a lot throughout your entire university program. We actually remain very good friends till this day. So for me, that was the best way to acclimatize. They'll show you how to work with the money, how to do the basics, get an adapter, get those small little things that you would never find in any travel book or on the internet. So it was quite helpful. But over time, you managed to integrate. Yeah.
Although adapting to the weather had to be the biggest challenge, right? I lived in the UK for 10 years, and
Yeah.
the only thing I could say about the weather is that it's worse in Belgium.
Yes, the weather was horrible. Weather was horrible. If you know anything about Kampala, Uganda, it's sunny. It's okay. It does rain quite a lot, but then it's also across the equator, so the average temperature is in between 21 and 32 degrees all year round. So it's amazing. Then you get these negative fives and rain, and it's not the best, not the best. But the law school and the pressure to learn all the different subjects, of course, kind of puts you away from that. But yeah, it helps you go through it.
So after you graduated from Warwick, you went straight to I can't remember what city it was in Germany where you
Yeah,
pursued the LLM.
yeah. I after my after Warwick, of course, I didn't go straight. I tried at the time to get a training contract, and I graduated right in the middle. I think of the 2011 downturn, the financial crisis, the Euro crisis. I think yes. So all the law firms everyone was downsizing. Guys were taking on students, say 45 students on training contracts. Were cutting down to 15. Competition was quite heavy. It doesn't help that, of course, they would need to pay for my work permit as an employer, so wouldn't be looked at favorably. I would have a higher requirement. So I chose to go for my master's, and I went to Frankfurt in Germany at University of Gotha. It's an institute of law and finance. That's where I did my LLM.
What led you to focus on finance and corporate law for the LLM? Is it something in at work that you came across, or was it something you thought was most likely to lead to future employment? What went into that? Your thinking there?
Yeah, I- even from day one, law school, I'd, of course, the average student is always inspired by the movies where people go into court and shout objection. I had never been really intrigued by litigation. I would find it interesting, but it was just never my thing. So the more went into my degree towards my final years, I did more and more research about corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. I think there was a big deal at the time. It was, I think, Cadbury. There was, I think, a Cadbury acquisition at the time. So I really focused into that and the different aspects from antitrust to the employment elements to. So it became like a really big thing that I wanted to do. So I ended up looking for LLMs that are a bit focused on corporate law, and of course, I was tired of the UK. I wanted the European. I'd been to Europe. I wanted the European experience. It's a bit less. I can't really explain, but it's not as strict and rigid. So I felt that yeah, I need to try something different. So I landed on the program at Gotha, and it was quite interesting. Also got a scholarship for that. So I think all the stars were aligned. I never looked back.
So was that program more focused on civil law? How did the common law civil law division work out in the fact that you had a uh, first law degree in a common law jurisdiction and then a LLM in a civil law jurisdiction?
Yeah, interestingly, the civil law element never really came up because we're doing it was mainly focused on like say corporate finance. So we're getting into like LMA documentation. How do you structure the whole agreement? So you call courses about that. Then you go into mergers and acquisitions where you start from due diligence, the initial non-binding offer, the different steps, due diligence, this is the offer, then the terms and conditions, then the final, how you close, then capital markets as well. So it didn't really get into the civil law part. It was mainly primarily focused on corporate finance. So the different ways in which entities could raise finance. So that's what the course was mainly focused in. And for me, that really opened up my eyes. I just got interested in that and I've never looked back.
So when you graduated, you joined Milbank in Frankfurt, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
That
Uh,
was a short-term thing after graduation. What was that experience like?
it was a compulsory. It was part of the degree program that we had to do an
Ah,
internship.
okay.
Yeah, so you have a 6 month 3 month internship with any of the English speaking law firms in Germany. So I managed to get into Milbank. It was an amazing experience. I had an English law partner, Andrew Morton. He actually was still very good friends up to now. And 3 months turned into 6 months, turned into a year until the government of Germany said, "Hey, you need to go back. You know, you either make it permanent or get out." So I was there for actually it ended up becoming 13 months. I was there for 13 months. So it was good. They kept on saying, "Ah, you can do another 3 months." A deal we had that kept dragging on and on and on, and they couldn't really pass it on to another person. So it was an amazing experience. I learned quite a lot at the time. Yeah.
So then you had to go home back to Kampala and you joined Bowman's, which, if I'm right from my time in South Africa, is a South African headquartered law firm, correct? But with offices all over Africa.
Yeah. I was supposed now to go back to England and work in the Millbank office in London.
Yeah,
But I had some family issues. My dad wasn't well, so of course I said, "Let me go take some time back home." And when I reached home, I had quite a number of offers. Bowman's was good because I had known and heard about it before, and they were doing the kind of work that I had been working in. The corporate law, raising financing with the different companies in and around Kampala. So it was easier for me to get with them. We started as well as like a small come in, have a few hours, see what you can do, help us here, help us there. Then before we knew it became permanent, and I ended up spending almost 4 years with them. Yeah, went all the way to associate level.
great. So
Yeah.
you were working on deals there in
Yeah.
corporate. Were you in the corporate finance? Were
Yeah.
most of those deals? Go ahead.
Yes, I was working on a number on deals, mainly primarily, and the Ugandan aspect of, because most of the, as you've said, it was a South African law firm. So the deals they'll be working on are Pan African. So they would always have like it's mainly the main or the head location is South Africa, but then probably there's a jurisdiction in Uganda, there's a jurisdiction in Kenya. So you advise on the Ugandan law aspects of the deal. But of course, it helps if you know the entire deal structure. You end up working at an even higher level. So there were quite a number of transactions going on at the time in Uganda. So it was literally perfect timing for me to get in.
So talk a little bit more about that. How these cross-border deals work, because I think most people would assume that if you're working on a deal in Uganda, that it's Ugandan law, where more often what you're working on is a deal that's got a piece of it in Uganda, and it the deal itself is almost always, pick one, UK, US,
Mhm.
um, some other law, with the people doing at the head of the deal trying to figure out which parts of the law, the local law, can they not avoid. Did I get Is that similar to your experience?
Yeah, I think you've mentioned it quite, you've described it quite well. Uh, the deal would primarily be English law or US law because of the way the conglomerates or the big businesses, the big companies that are coming into Africa are structured. And you would always have to, the Ugandan element would always be, for example, if it's in the financing, you would have to think about how you're going to perfect the security, because chances are the security of of whatever transaction you have is in Uganda, the shares are in Uganda, or the actual asset is in Uganda, whether it's land, whether it's property, whether it's anything. So, in order to have the perfection of that security, it has to be under Ugandan law. So that at the point in time when a transaction needs to be, when you have to enforce, you have the capacity to enforce. Otherwise, it doesn't help you having everything you do in England, but then you cannot actually enforce and pick up the asset that you have to pick up at the time. And there are other issues such as, say, employment. So if it's an M&A deal and they're buying a business and there are a couple of employees here in Uganda, yes, the transaction and buying the assets may be under UK or US law. And however, the people you're going to be employed are Ugandans and they're governed by local employment laws, the labor laws. So that has got to feed into the whole transaction. And that's the part that we mainly played, because you have a bit of knowledge of the UK law and also how to balance the Ugandan law element. So it has to fit in quite well. Otherwise, the transaction will always fall apart at some
Did you
stage.
ever encounter any frustration with local law? Yeah,
Frustration.
if you well,
Uh
let me phrase the question a little bit different. Some guy like me sitting in London saying, "But I don't want it to be that way."
huh. Oh, yeah, of course, all the time. You would always get one or two, especially if you get the lawyers who have never done transactions before that are in that model, especially coming in from the US for the first time or coming in UK, not so much, but mainly actually European lawyers coming in for the first time, or guys from the US. They will always say, no, we don't trust. How can we be subject? We have no control over the court systems. You
Mm.
guys have kangaroo courts. The judges are going to be bribed. We have to change it in this way. You're like, no, no, no. Whatever you do, you've got to just show the number of other transactions you've had and the different cases and how you handled it over time and how you can structure it in a way that balances the two. So it's more of a lesson and trying to convince the party on the other side. Otherwise, if the transaction is being financed by a bank, the bankers probably know how things work. So they'll probably advise their client that please, we have to do it in this way. So there are a couple of ways in which that could, it always goes.
Yeah, one of the things I used to always tell people is when you're doing business in Africa and when you're trying to, buy things in Africa, you have to stop with the thinking that there is such a thing as Africa as a legal thing. You know,
Mm.
I literally, I didn't get asked the question, but I literally heard the question passed along to me from a major U.S. company that said, "Listen, we understand that there are 53 different countries in Africa, but
Yeah.
is it one legal system?" You go, "Well, no, it's not."
It's not. No, no,
It,
not at all. And
I
they are
mean, there,
all so diverse,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, there are
Oh,
some commonalities in English
okay.
speaking Africa as opposed to French speaking Africa, but yeah,
The-
you have to look at each country as the sovereign country that it is with its own system.
Exactly. And there are certain overriding factors. Business, for example, that I was really focused in, you really need to understand the land tenure system. And I think if you don't appreciate that each country has a different system, then you're already in the wrong place. And it even makes it worse, whereby you'd find a country, for example, Uganda, where we are, it has seven different land systems within Uganda. So it depends on which part of Uganda you're in, which I think is kind of similar to the US, how each and every state has its own different kind of laws. However, they all feed into the federal at the top. So
Right.
you just have to explain that, we're not so different, but you need to appreciate the way we're structured. Yeah.
So after however long you were, 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
is that when you joined Eaton Towers as company secretary
Yeah.
and legal?
Yeah. I worked on two transactions for Eaton Towers while I was at Bowman's. The first one was the acquisition of towers from Orange. I think Orange was selling off its assets, and Eaton Towers had come in, gotten a license, so it was buying the Orange portfolio. And I happened to be the guy on the ground, do the due diligence, go read up all the documentation for each and every tower to see if it's accurate, see if the landlords are actually real, find all the different local law elements, tax issues, labor laws in terms of people who are going to now lose some, because they used to employ quite a number of people to work in the towers, so they had to be integrated into Eaton Towers itself, because now it was a new company and needed people who knew where the towers are and had never been in Uganda. So you're looking at transition of people from Orange to the company. So I walked into that for the first time. Then it picked off quite well. I remained as Eaton's point. Say, I'm now used to this world, so relationship manager, I would think. So each and everything Eaton had, they would always reach out to me, whether it was tax, whether it was employment, whether it was immigration, literally their day-to-day stuff. I was the one doing it. So another transaction came in where Eaton was now buying the Airtel portfolio. So it was again copy paste. I had done the previous one before. The same one with Airtel, and included a financing there. I think there was also a big IFC financing at some point there in between. So it was only after the Airtel transaction when they realized that, by the way, one of the MD at the time, this guy called Pasha, he said, why don't you just come and work for me? I mean, are you happy? He said, come, let's have a drink. I had never thought about it, to be honest. And I was like, you know everything about the business. You know everyone in the company. How much are you paid? I'll double it. I said, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, was it over a drink? And yeah, of course, on this other side, there are certain frustrations with the Ugandan system as well, because maybe that's a part we haven't spoken about. The system as it was, which has changed quite a lot now, they had never appreciated the separation of barrister and solicitor, like someone who sits and does paperwork for. So in the farm all the time, they would say, please go to court. There's a case here, there's some client, please run and do this. I was like, guys, come on. You reach court, it has its own frustrations. The judge is sick, you've traveled for 6 hours. You're like, no. I can't keep doing this. So I need to focus into something that I'm really interested in. And I had learned a bit about the business. So the decision was quite easy for me. And it helped that the law firm was known to me. The partners were good. So they were happy to see me grow into a different role. So I just naturally transitioned to in house at Eaton Towers.
So the partners were probably thinking of you as a future source of work, right? Because you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they were. They were. It was. So I understood it from that perspective as well. Afterwards, I was like, so that's why you said yes. Okay.
How did that work out for him? I don't remember when I eventually joined. I don't remember if they were still around or not.
They were still around, but because I was now in house, I was resolving all the problems. So I never had any litigation. We used to sit with all the people who were fighting, sit on the table, let's solve it out, have a cup of tea. You don't have to go to court. Withdraw the case. We'll pay you. So I learned that actually from avoid litigation at all costs. So we only retained external counsel for very complex issues. So, but they were around at the time you were there. They were around, lurking in the background. Sorry about that.
So when you joined, you had a pretty good understanding of what the job would be and what their business would be.
Yeah, I thought I did. I thought I
Yeah.
did.
What
But
was different?
I had to learn generators. I had to learn Excel. Excel, Excel. Oh, and I'm still not good at it. But at least I can have one or two things I can say. I entered the world of engineers, so my mindset as a lawyer had to really change quite a lot. These are people who are very scientific. They want a result. They want to see things. They don't like a lot of talking. So you've changed even the way you write your email. Make it quick, make it brief, beginning, end, bullet points. Don't talk too much. So over time, I learned how to address them to make them understand my point, to show them that it always helps to give an example that's local. So if you have a legal problem, break it down to an engineering problem and how you resolve it. And it's an art that came on with time. So you had to learn how to communicate. I had to learn the lingo of the industry. It took time, but there was a lot of help over the way, and it was a great team as well. So it was good. It was a good transition for me.
So how did you expect to be spending your time, and what turned out to be completely different than what you expected?
Uh, coming from uh, a, I would say a big law firm in Uganda, uh, my average time for going home was between 10 and 11 every day, and I would be in office next day at 7. But remember, this time I had no kids. I wasn't married. I was just a young man driving along, enjoying myself, no responsibility, buy a sandwich and go to sleep. So until when I got in house, I realized actually there's way much more time on your hands. So you developed a culture, you come in early, before you know you've done all your work by say 2, 3 o'clock, then you sit, you're just looking around. The more you look around, the more people come to you for problems. So you learned how to balance your time. But I transitioned to a 9 to 5, at least average, unless there were transactions that Neil or someone from group was bringing on board and that ended up having to stretch. But the biggest change was I had a lot more time for myself to do even other things, which was good, different from the
It's not
corporate world.
always that way. So that's great that that actually worked out the way it should have.
That's true.
So there wasn't any formal, I think what you've already talked about, there wasn't any formal program for you to learn the business. You had to just get in there and understand it. What was the key for you of understanding the business and having credibility with the business that you understood it?
I think on day two, I think it was my second day in the business, I had a tower, a site, and a child had stepped on an electric wire in one of the remote sites and got electrocuted and died. That was my first problem. Day two. So I really much dived into deep end. So I had to learn. Okay, fine. There's a grieving family here. There's the police that's going that just wants to arrest anyone who comes from Eaton Towers. They're in already, so you have to deal with the police, understand the police lingo, which is very different. Then you have to deal with the family. Then you have to deal with the company and tell them that, okay, guys, we've done something wrong. It's not our fault. There was a subcontractor in between, but we are the ultimate responsibility bearer. So you need to balance the interests of the business because we don't want the tower to go away. We don't want it to go to the media. So that first case showed me the diversity of in-house counsel and how you've got to learn to balance so many different interests. And your job is just to be in the middle and make sure everyone is happy. But most importantly, your client and your business, because you need to report to the shareholder at the end of the day
Mhm.
and tell them, okay, fine, this is what I did, but it was in the best interest of the company. Because if I didn't do this, this is what would have happened. So I always look back at that moment because you have so many emotions. You go with a grieving family. Do you give them too much money? How much are they asking for? Do you learn how to negotiate? Make sure you get approval from London for that cash. So it was a lot. And then there's also learning the whole management element, which a typical lawyer doesn't have. I think that was for me the biggest lesson to learn the day to day management of a business and the different decision making, the powers that, not the powers, can I say, but to understand who has to be pleased, who's got to be addressed in this way. So to manage that is also a very important skill set to be able to get what the company wants to the right decision.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you had the land acquisition team under you as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. It had a dotted line approach to me, but at the end of the day,
Right.
they will always report to me. It's still a fight we have to this day. Operations takes over land. I'm like, why? It should be legal because you end up coming to me. But anyway, yeah, the land acquisition team is under me, and they go out, do all the negotiations with the landlords, come back. I have to look at all the leases and make sure they're signed off correctly and everything is spick and span.
So those were non-lawyers as well. So you had to, not only were you dealing with an engineering group that
Uh,
that wanted yes and no answers quickly,
yeah,
you also had non-lawyers that were out negotiating on the company's behalf and bringing back the ultimate solution and or problem to you, right?
yeah, 100%. Most of the time, the problem. Yeah, you're dealing with non-lawyers who are practically going around buying pieces of land, not buying, but okay, leasing out pieces of land from different people who are happy to sign off anything. They don't even know what they're signing. They only realize it after a couple of years what they signed and what it actually means. So it took a lot of time to create sort of forward structure, a template. Ask this question, this is the answer. If it says this, this is how it goes. So it took a bit of time to train them, but those do's and don'ts were all based on the law. So I had to train them to be able to walk within the required legal path. So yes, that was quite an interesting part as well, because the whole business is based on the validity of those leases. If the leases aren't valid, then you have nothing. You have no tower asset.
So I spent, I don't know, year and a half working with you
Mhm.
before I went on to my next adventure. I think one
Mm.
of the last things I did was change your title from manager to director. Um,
Yeah,
do I actually deserve the credit for that I'm taking?
yeah. You did. You changed. You showed me a whole different aspect of business, and I'm forever grateful. I remember that conversation. We were in a little shed, and I came to you with my big, won't get into the details, my big conundrum at the time, and you were like, George, really, what do you want? How opportunities? You're good. Stay with us. Stay here. And it's the reason I stayed was because of you, as in you're a good person, and it's one thing to work with someone who's better pay and everything, but it's another thing to work with someone who you're able to learn from. And even if you have 5-10 minutes, you still spew so much knowledge down to me that I can use up to today. I still use it, by the way. So thank you. Thank you for
No,
that.
well, I mean, I wasn't just fishing for a compliment. I mean, one of the things when you take over the legal department at a company that's already there, you go around and you visit every country. And when I got to Uganda, I was like, oh, thank goodness, there's a guy here that knows what he's doing. I can work with him. I can say 5-10 minutes. I mean, believe me, it didn't take me 5-10 minutes in every country to convey what I was trying to convey. With you, I would say something in 5 minutes, and you'd say, "Yeah, got it. I'm on it."
Yeah.
So it worked well on both sides of that. Um, and then um, after I left, Eaton was sold in January 2020. The deal had been announced 9 months earlier, and I guess without getting too deeply into the world of tower deals, um, that is not abnormal for a deal to take 9 months to close, because it depends then on the guys on the ground like you to get every single tower closed. It's really not one deal. It's however many thousand towers you've got is how many
Yeah.
deals you have to do.
Yeah. Oh, that was, of course, now my nice 9 to 5 I mentioned earlier clearly goes out of the window during these last 2 years.
Yeah.
I go back to full robot mode and calls and questions and interviews. It was a very hectic time because one for 1 minute you're the single point of contact for literally the entire deal in Uganda because our MDC or they don't want to our MD at the time and the entire management team don't want to deal with the lawyers. So everything, George, please come answer. You're like, guys, this is about operations. It has nothing to do with me, but I still have to be there. So you have to deal with external parties. You have to deal with the day-to-day work because the way the deal was structured, we had to hit certain targets internally to be able to reach certain bonuses. So guys went into overdrive to work
Mhm.
and close, say, another 200 sites in 6 months. I think it was massive. People were working and I'm even shocked. Actually, we were able to do that. So you have to manage that as well. The day-to-day operations, which was had to happen in order for the business to reach a point of where they can say yes. Then, of course, you can never have 100% portfolio that's clean. Murphy's Law, they will always go to the data room, pick up 5 sites, and someone scanned a lease upside down and missed 2 pages. you get a long email and says, oh, the leases are invalid. They don't have a date because the person didn't scan the first date. So you have to clean up that entire file. That takes you. I had to hire some, actually had to hire a team to just sit and do scanning again properly for all the documentation. So that's another aspect. Then you have to deal with the regulator, of course, because it's a regulated industry, which is another big part I think we've not really gotten into, but it's a massive part into it. The deal was quite special in Uganda because there were two tower companies, and the acquisition was going to lead to only creation of one. So we don't really have a competition law in Uganda, but the regulator, who is the Uganda Communications Commission, has a competition desk, and I think this was the first time they ever did anything. They had been just having beers and sandwiches every day for their whole lives. So for the first time, they have to get competition law approval for that transaction, and they had no idea what they're doing. So again, we had to go in, put on the hat of the regulator, and say, okay, I'm not the person, but this is how you look at the deal from a competition perspective. They had to bring, I think they brought in Analysis Mason. They had to bring in an external party to again do an independent overview of the whole transaction. So that's why it took such a long time. But yeah, it was a very, very hectic period. And we're glad after, actually, it was announced on 31st December 2020. It was New Year's. I remember that. So guys were celebrating New Year's Eve, and I'm there sending emails, and finally the email comes, everything's been approved, everything's been signed. Yes, go party. It was a good feeling to get it done after so many months of hard work.
And then you decided to pursue going independent instead of staying with the merged entity. Is that right?
Yeah, that that
Four
was
months later, I guess, right?
no, yes, officially 4 months later, but I had already seen an opportunity there actually. The new company was, of course, we know what M&A means. There are two head of legals, there are two CFOs, there are two MDs. You you all can't work, and I'm not the type of person who's going to go in for to compete and said, you know what, no, I'm not. I would rather. I think there's a better opportunity available, and I had another experience with a company that was doing e-mobility in Uganda, which we founded with some other friends of mine from Belgium. It's called Safe Borders. So I had seen how they had raised money, Series A, Series B, built a very beautiful company, had a couple of interesting challenges as a startup. So I got opened into the startup world from that angle. And I was like, oh, actually, I think we could do something similar. I thought it was just, I can open up, I go present to the commission, I get a license. And now that there are two tower, there's only one TowerCo, there would always need to be a second one. So that was my main drive. So that's how we made the decision because of the gap that existed in the market. But it
And
was no mean feat. Yeah.
not to mention that you launched right in the middle of the pandemic. What was that like in Uganda?
Um, that was one of the toughest things I've ever done. We, of course, we had, like entrepreneurs, you just go in, you have a brilliant idea, you don't know, you just start writing what I'm going to do on day one, this is what I'm going to do day two. But there are so many curveballs that keep coming up. You don't expect all the different problems. A major one was COVID. So all this time we're pitching to investors to come and throw in some money, help us start this business. I, it's a whole new pitch deck to 5 minutes. You've spent months looking for just 10 minutes to pitch to this person. And all of a sudden the country's shut down. You can't really do anything. You can't really go around to the commission to follow up on your license. You cannot go up to the different companies to get your master tower service agreements. It's so it was very, very damning. We couldn't move, and yet we had invested a lot of personal money into the business. So all of the three of us who decided to do it it was a nice package we got when we finished that deal. So majority of it as it came, we just all threw it into this new business. And majority of the money just went into so many things that up to now we don't even know. But yeah, it was not easy.
Must have been, I don't know. I was in South Africa at the time of the lockdown, and when I tell people from other countries what the lockdown was like there, I don't know what it was like in Uganda, but we weren't allowed to leave the house other than to go to the grocery store or the drugstore. There were no restaurants. There was no any. You couldn't go to the beach. Couldn't go to the restaurant. You couldn't couldn't walk my dogs in the neighborhood. It was that crazy. I don't know what was it like in Uganda.
I think Uganda had by far one of the toughest and were the second last country to actually open up. President was really he went into super mode. Everything was just shut down. We were also not allowed to leave the houses. To get a permit to move it was easier getting a visa, to be honest, or something like that. I mean, it was impossible. Everything was locked down. Even services had to drop because even now, for example, telecommunications had to go down. So things that we took for granted, like internet, also had to become limited. It wasn't as good because now everyone was using it at home. So it was really, 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 really difficult. I recall that, and I wonder how we actually went through that. 2 whole years. 2 whole years we had that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me switch gears and talk a bit more. You talked earlier about using outside counsel kind of only when you had to. Did that continue to be the way you viewed outside counsel and when you used them going forward, or did you have to send more things outside?
No, I maintain that, and I still do. I try and limit the use. I only keep it to a point where, of course, there's could be a breach, and I need. Of course, when you're inside counsel, one of the first things you lose touch with is the law, because somehow when you're in practice in the law firm, guys are always talking around. You keep picking up on new developments in the law. There's a new case has come. There's a new precedence on this. This has changed. This has changed. So if you don't take personal interest in keeping up with how things are developing, before you know something that is always fast changing, like in banking, it keeps changing every almost 6 months. There's a new precedent. So if you don't have that up to date capacity, you're always off. So one of the things I really use law firms for is to keep myself abreast. So I keep asking them every month, send me an update in all these positions. So that's the first major. It's a very, especially as a one man office, it's quite helpful because I don't have time to do a lot of research, but you keep up to date with most of the things that are happening. Second, I kept them for more complex matters. I pushed out quite a lot of groundbreaking litigation. For example, I remember there's a law whereby the city council was making us charge property tax for towers. They were calling a tower property because it was a permanent structure. So we had to go in to prove that a tower is not permanent. It can be moved if there's need to. And that changed quite a lot. It's still a precedent that's used today in the industry. And it's been applied to petrol stations, it's been applied to kiosks. So yeah, I kept them for very few important cases, which happened to move on for quite some time. So it's not that they were not busy; they were doing quite a lot of work, but not every day litigation or look through this contract or no. I kept most of that work in house.
So, over the course of your career, have you become more or less deferential to the expertise of outside counsel?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think I'm in the middle. Uh,
Okay.
you would always think you're good, then you get again a new angle which you completely have no clue about, whereby you would always need to hear someone else and see how they've done it. Now there's a lot of stuff in competition. Competition has really grown. One of the first major triumphs I had in this company, the new one, was we had to take on ATC for anti-competitive clauses. So again, went back to that desk. That was now getting a bit more busier. We put in a formal competition application. Went all the way to Comesa. It was a complaint. Sorry, it was hard. We had to do back and forth. It was very interesting. But now something like that, I had to tap into Bowmans that had some experience from someone who does competition on the day to day. So I had to tap into law firms to give me some sort of expertise, which I couldn't handle locally. So I think you've got to find the right balance. But for me, I'm still 50-50 because either way, as you can't be all know it, say it all. You've got to have someone else to always sign off, especially financing transactions, corporate governance decisions. Sometimes you need to just have someone else to have a look at it to protect yourself. I think it's good for basic corporate governance. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned in there was COMESA. For people that don't know what COMESA is, can you give a quick explanation of what COMESA is?
Yeah, COMESA, if I'm to get it right, it's the Common Market for East and Southern Africa. So this is a common market for all the countries in East Africa and South Africa. I think it has like 14 member states. And the intention was to have free trade between all the countries. And it's been in existence since, I think, I don't want to be caught out here, but I can double check that. It's been in existence since the
It's been
80s, I
around a
think.
while.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
around a while. And free trade kind of trying to get into the EU mod, but not fully the EU, not yet fully integrated. So this one is just on a free trade area. So one of the ways that would break um, the trade barriers was to set up a competition commission. So all the countries that have to do any M&A deals, as long as it's in between two COMESA states or more, you need to apply to the COMESA Competition Commission to give an approval. And then if there is an issue that, for example, our competitor had stations in more than one COMESA country, so we're challenging them because of certain clauses which required that they have a right of first refusal for uh, each and every site that is offered by Airtel. I'll be honest, yeah, it's public information. So we challenge that because, of course, a right of first refusal means that I can never get the chance to fairly compete. So we submitted that to both the UCC and Commercial Competition Commission, and we were successful. It was squashed and the clause had to be removed. Enforcement is a different story altogether because it still happens, but at least we had a fast. Yeah.
great. So I've only got a couple of questions left. I want to check in with Omar and see if he wants to jump in at this point.
Sure,
You
of
got
course.
anything, Omar?
Yeah, of
Go
course. Hey,
ahead.
George, how are you? Um,
Cheers, I'm alright.
s- so I have a question. So, someone who has not ever been in this transactional world, what is the day-to-day operations? What do you normally do? How does your day start? And then how do you end your day?
Okay. For starters, I'll put a very big caveat. There is no standard day. Every day has its own different structures. But for me, I am an early riser, so I'm always in office quite early. It
Mm.
helps because if you have things on your desk, you clear up everything you have to do by, say, 10 o'clock. Then, because of the nature of the business, everyone always wants to confirm with legal, check what legal says. So my door is always open. Everyone walks in, walks in, walks in. Pretty much I deal with day-to-day things as they come. Then of course you have meetings with customers, you have meetings with um, landlords. I think that takes up quite a lot of time.
Mm.
Neil mentioned the property team that I have. They usually manage most of that negotiation, or someone coming in with a problem, someone coming in, oh, I want an advance, I need an operation, I have cancer, or my child has cancer. You need to now manage that. If it reaches, if they can't handle it, they now escalate it to myself. So I get, in a typical day, I have to manage quite a lot of such types of meetings. But then we also have a group reporting structure. So you always have, say, weekly legal meetings. You also have monthly catch ups. You have to deal with management related elements. So each and every day has a different management. Say you have an exco meeting, or you have a meeting to approve certain payments for the week. You have a meeting. So the meeting, the typical day is spread across
Hmm.
your own legal stuff, then dealing with people who are just walk-ins. Then you also have external parties that may also be walk-ins, and management stuff. But then you also have external meetings you may have with a regulator. The regulator can call you anytime. You need to be at your beck and call. So it's pretty much diverse, but I
I
could
see.
say I'm always home. I made it a personal rule. I'm always home by 4 to 5. This is fast. I'm usually not in the office at this time.
I see. And then are you oh, do you work with do you work with other attorneys, or are you the sole attorney and then you have other people helping you out?
I'm the sole attorney,
You're the sole attorney.
unfortunately.
Okay.
I've been trying to get extra hire for a while, but
I
it's the
see.
first part that gets cut out. We don't need. We have you. Everything is fine, George. You're okay. So I'm like, all right, that's
George, I
okay.
think so. The second question that I have, this might be a little too personal, but like, what motivates you? Is it the money, or is it just you want to? What really motivates you for you to stay up all night every day to work long hours? What drives you?
Okay. It's changed over years. Before was learning. I had a stage when I wanted to know and learn more. Then I had a stage whereby I was now getting into the industry and I'm learning from someone like Neil, and he gives you a task. You have to be at top of it. So you've got to show and perform at a certain level. Then I moved into the founder entrepreneur stage whereby I have a business. It's amazing to see it grow from one tower to 500 sites, all which all started off a piece of paper with some friends. So you look
Mm,
at all that and you're like, yeah, I'm actually proud of what I've achieved. And yeah, now looking into what we can move out there. To be honest, currently it's just the pride of going into your business and seeing it grow.
that's awesome. Thank you, George.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
no problem. Good to hear from you.
All right, last question, George. If you can
Yes.
go back uh, to the almost 20 years, I guess, to the University of Warwick and have a conversation with first year law student George, what would you tell yourself?
I actually think about that all the time. I would have still done the same course, of course, but I would have chosen a different path, because if you go through straight law, it's a bit difficult. I would have done, say, politics, PPE, had another language. I should have learnt another language. I didn't learn another language, which I think is something that's quite important today. I would have traveled more, and it helps to be more diverse, to see more things. What I learned in the 12 months while I was in Europe, okay, the 12 months of education while I was in Europe supersedes everything that I did in the UK, because you get exposed to so many different things. You can think the UK is it, it's the top. No, you go and learn how people do it in Netherlands, how people do it in Belgium, how people do it in Germany, how someone from Spain negotiates, how someone from Greece negotiates. And when you now get into this world and you see that you're dealing with so many different cultures, so many different people, it helps to have that ability to bring in every person. The way I deal with person X is not how you deal with person Y. And if you don't get that early enough,
Mm.
I think that's one of the best ways to go through. So I would probably have chosen a different route, had a bit, probably a gap year, or done a year abroad, and done just the UK bar immediately after.
You said
Great.
a
Come back.
different. You said a different language. What language are you talking about specifically?
For Africa, French. For Africa, French. For
Oh.
Africa, French. It's a safe. If I was more flamboyant, I would have said Chinese, but or Mandarin, but nah. Probably not in another 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I spent 4 years living in Belgium and never managed to pick up French. So it's
Mm.
just, sometimes it's but the problem I had was when I would try and speak French, people that spoke English would just be like, "Oh my God, you're hurting my ears. Let's just speak English." And I'd be like, "No, I need to practice my French." They'd be like, "No, you don't. You don't need to practice your French."
Okay. Where were you in Belgium, if I may ask?
Brussels, Brussels.
Brussels.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. That was interesting. I didn't
interesting
know you were
place.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was before my time in London, where I had to learn how
Okay.
to speak British English, and I still
Oh.
have it. I still ask people like, "Where's the queue?" and things, and people look at me like I'm insane.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
All
And
right, George, anything we didn't ask you that we should have asked you?
no, I would rather say, can I ask one question?
Sure.
How is the switch for you from
Mm.
corporate world to university, and how does your mind? Because I know Neil in corporate world. I didn't know Neil in
Yeah.
this world, so I would really want to see how it is for you.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons I'm here is because of the when I was in the corporate world. To be able to come in and take the corporate law center here at the university and take my pretty much global experience at it and look at different possibilities. So one of the first things that I'm doing is this podcast where we're talking to people, some like you that I've known for a long time, some that I'm just meeting,
Yeah.
because I really want to. I view my job now as building bridges between your world and Omar's world,
Yeah.
and of helping the law students see what's possible. Because frankly, I had no idea what's possible. If you'd told me when I left Cincinnati 33 years ago, because this is where I went to school, that I would be back as the corporate law center director, I would have never believed it because I didn't think I was going to be a corporate lawyer. I thought I was going to be a litigator. Unlike
Oh.
you, I thought early on. I mean, and I spent 6 years as a litigator in private practice, and 5 years after that, mostly managing litigation.
Mhm.
Before I suddenly found myself doing M&A work when we had more deals than could be handled by the people that were there.
Ah, okay.
So anyway, the answer to your question is I'm having a lot of fun. I, getting back to the point where, like, I'm working with one of the professors on writing an article for a corporate law symposium we're having next spring. So, like, sitting down and actually reading a case from beginning to end, something I certainly haven't done since I left private practice. Um,
Mhm.
and, I the one I'm working on is an environmental case. And so
Mhm.
yesterday I was listening to the Supreme Court arguments on another environmental case, San Francisco versus EPA. And it was the first time in God knows how long that I was listening to an argument and had read the briefs and actually knew what they were talking about instead
Uh,
of, just having an opinion based on, well, these six guys were appointed by those people and those three ladies were appointed by these others, and everything that they say and do is, through that frame. And, yeah, some of that's true, but not all. So
Okay.
anyway, I'm having fun.
No,
Hopefully they keep paying me when they find out that I'm having fun doing it.
no, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, and that's the most important thing. As long as you're enjoying what you do, then that's it.
Yep, I
That's a
agree.
very big important part. You must enjoy what you do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed catching up with you. Let's stay in touch and not make it an every 5 years thing.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, that's true. Pleasure to meet
All
you,
right.
Omar, and wish you the best in your course. And
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
all
Thank you.
right.
Take
Cheers.
All
care.
right. Take care,
Okay.
guys. Thanks.
Bye
See you.
bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.